Saying I was going to talk about my faith journey is much easier than actually writing it. My faith is like my irritable bowel syndrome. It's very personal and has a big effect on my life, and I rarely discuss it in a public setting like this. Anyway, oftentimes when somebody journeys out of evangelicalism, they describe it as faith deconstruction, but I prefer to call my process renovation. I didn't lose my faith, but it looks very different from when I began. So let's start with the foundation. I've always been spiritually oriented, even in my preschool years, well before any religious instruction. I felt, and I still feel in my gut, that there's something more to this universe than what we can see and detect. When I was 15, my mom and I decided to pursue our spirituality together. And in my small town, your only option for that was Christian. So we joined a church that at the time was very friendly and caring, and they did their best to welcome the poor and to welcome questions. Then I went to Johnson Bible College in Knoxville, Tennessee. Now it is Johnson University. I played varsity basketball one season. We won a game. But fast forward, I'm back home. I'm now a freelance court reporter at the time, not now, but at that time I was a freelance court reporter. And then I married a minister who at that time had stepped back from ministry, long story. And then my church hired him. So here's where things stood at the point just before my renovations began. Now, by this time, the church had a different senior minister who was more insular and not open to new ideas or questions. And he led and still leads the church with this attitude. I have examples. I do not have time. So let's begin deconstruction. In 2006, my now ex-husband decided to start a church, and we moved to the town where I live today. So to prepare, we studied original first century church practices, which were very different from the structure seen today. Example, all offerings were given to the poor, except for the occasional offering to a traveling evangelist to cover his expenses. All offerings were given to the poor. There were no big church buildings, no paid staff except for the evangelists I mentioned, no fancy bound Bibles, no Bibles at all. So I began to work out with this in mind. What meant most to me? What is the foundation? There were two verses that I kept coming back to and still do. Jesus in the book of Matthew, chapter 22, said that all the law was summed up as love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. As, not necessarily more, but as. And that's it. That's the foundation. Everything else is added by humans. Everything. The second benchmark I used was Matthew chapter 7, and I've abridged it a little bit. It says, be on your guard against false prophets. You'll be able to tell them by their fruit. A sound tree produces good fruit, and a rotten tree produces bad fruit. Now, this verse is in regards to false prophets, but I apply it to anything under the sun, including Christian dogma and practice. What is causing good? What is causing harm? So let's begin the renovation. My faith began to widen. Without the ecclesiastical oversight of what I was reading and learning, I'm free to find truth in other spiritual arenas, including something so mundane as yoga, which feels ridiculous to say now, but I was warned that the poses themselves invite demonic possession, even though there's been no credible evidence of this. It's like cow tipping. I know several people who say they know someone who's been cow tipping, but I don't know anyone who has actually gone cow tipping. But it is not easy to question your beliefs when that's the only reality to which you have access. And you're constantly warned by everyone in your circle that everything outside this circle is harmful and meant to steer you away from Christ. Eventually, the church fell through, then the marriage fell through, but my faith journey is still going on. And if you ask me what my religion is, I don't have a concise, neat label that'll help you classify me in a little box, because the deconstruction and renovation is still ongoing, and it will continue for my lifespan, I hope. Because without the pressures of the evangelicalism to constantly memorize scripture and to constantly push your faith on others and to constantly be aware, I'm finally able to enjoy my faith. which was my draft speech as of 9 a.m. on October 31st last week. That morning, I learned that one of my friends from the aforementioned church planting days died in a horrible Final Destination type accident. She was driving southbound, and a truck carrying logs was going northbound. The truck hit an overpass, and the logs fell on our car. Now, she and I have lost most touch. She'd moved away, but it was still pretty devastating to learn. So God and I are having a discussion. I told him, thought this was bullshit. Because Miriam was the personification of sunshine and daisies, and she did not have a cruel bone in her body, and surely there's a local pedophile available instead. And I've heard people say God has his reasons, or God mean an angel, and those cop-out statements are very insulting to the grieving person. Let me tell you, it only comforts the speaker. But perhaps wrestling with spiritual concepts can make your faith stronger. Jacob wrestled with God. So many Psalms are a cry out to God. Why? The book of Job is all about this struggle, and it doesn't give a simple, satisfying answer either. So if we don't wrestle with the tough questions, but we simply respond with formulaic answers, if we don't slow down and sit with confusion and anger and ambiguity and frustration, is it really faith?